So did you miss me? Yes. Oh man, I've been missing everybody around here. So good to be together, have a few people in the room, although it's a bit warmer. When you guys weren't here, it was like 5 degrees in here and I loved it, and everyone else had to wear that, but now it's not, sucking up all the extra hair, so it's a bit warmer, but it's great. It's great to hang out and be together, and it's great to have all of our locations and our family gatherings going on, you guys online and that. It's just fantastic for that, to be able to be together and to hang out. So this series here, where it was originally spoken by Andy Stanley in 2015, and I came across it and I felt like, wow, that is so pertinent to where we are right now. And I thought if I could contextualize that, and so we started a partnership with North Point Church and Andy Stanley, and they've been so grateful and gracious and allowing us to actually contextualize. So thank you to those guys for this. But I think this series is can totally transform some people's lives. Totally transform. Let me ask you a question right off the bat. Do you have ears to hear and eyes that can see? Do you have ears to hear and eyes that can see? If you do, I think you're going to catch some stuff through this series that will totally, totally transform you. So let me ask you a question right off the bat. What makes you happy? What makes you happy? Now, let me show you what makes me happy. These make me happy. And before I was married, I used to ride one of these. Makes me happy. I don't have one of these anymore. I'm not so happy now. So I've had to change. So I've had to change what makes me happy. So I've moved across to this because it's far cheaper to barbecue shakes. But the question is, what makes you happy? What makes you happy? Now, for some of you, that question, you've got to think back a little. You've got to think back a little bit about to what actually makes you happy. Some of us have to go back a long way. I think about 15 years ago, I had clinical depression, and it was a very, very dark time, extremely dark, and I just wasn't happy. I was a fairly unhappy person. I had a lot of health issues, and I went to the doctor eventually. I should have gone a lot earlier to get some help, and he asked me that question. He said, what makes you happy, Kev? And I couldn't answer the question. I sat there in the chair and I just cried because I couldn't answer the question. Now I can tell right now what's going on in some of the locations, because I actually took on the nickname Happy. Anita and Ann gave me the nickname Happy, but it wasn't because I was happy, it was because I was a misery guts. And right now at all our locations, there's COVID elbows going right now. You should listen, he's talking to you. So what makes you happy? What makes you happy? Over this next few weeks, we're going to actually tell you what makes you happy. Now, I know some of you are going to go, well, how can you possibly tell me what makes me happy? You don't know me from a bar of soap. But the reality is, advertisers and marketers are telling you every single day on billboards and radio and TV and on the internet, they're telling you what you need to be happy. That's what they're doing. That's what they're doing all the time. Now, come on, let's be honest. How many of you have fallen prey to late night infomercials? Can't sleep, put the TV on, and out comes this wonderful cream that's the secret for aging. And you can take this pill, and you will lose your belly fat in less than 2 weeks. I bet people here still have an ab rocker somewhere in their garage or a total gym, wanting to be like Chuck Norris, because they market to us. They're marketing happiness to us. And this is how they project it. They project this. They project if only. If only. If only, if only, if only. If only I drove a BMW. If only I had a McLaren. If only I wore Ralph Lauren clothes. Doesn't work for me, polo's too hot. But if only, that's what they market. They fill in the blanks. They want to tell you what you need to be happy. And the truth is, we have wasted tons of money in the pursuit of happiness, trying to fill a void that you just can't fill. And the reason is this: you can't You can't market and sell actual happiness. You can't market and sell it. You can only purchase happiness moments that don't last. You can't actually market and sell happiness. You can only purchase happiness moments. And this is the reason why some of us don't know what makes us happy anymore. We are so consumed with going from happy moment to happy moment that we don't know what makes us happy anymore. And some of us have forgotten what makes us happy. And that's what this series is about. The pressures of life have come upon us and we do not know or have forgotten what makes us happy. And our spiritual enemy is deliberately doing that because he wants to keep you in that place where you will lack freedom. So over this next few weeks, I'm going to give you today just a high flyover, like a 30,000 feet flyover across the top, and then we're going to unpack this and we're going to work out what actually makes human beings happy. And the first thing you need to know about is happiness is more about who than what. If happiness was about what, this would be so easy. We'd just buy you whatever your what is and you're going to be happy. You'll be so happy all the time because you've got your what and you'll be happy. But the trouble is, the happy what doesn't last. This is what the marketers do. Because happy what always leads to happy what else? Happy what else? I got some very wealthy friends in Ipswich, and I always said to them, just how much do you need to be happy? What do you actually, just a little bit more. See, happy what is always leading to happy what else. I remember as a kid, I was a very, very sickly kid, and so I would work the system with my mum. And I would say, you know what, if I just get this one thing, I just want this one thing. If I get this one thing, I will never, ever want for anything again. I never want anything, Mum. And Mum would be looking with those eyes, and Dad would go, don't you dare. A few hours later, it would come back. And there it would be, the thing that would make me happy for about 2 hours. And then I'd be off, and I'd be off again. Why? Because happy what always leads to happy what else. This happens to us as adults, You got your iPhone, it does all this wonderful stuff. My iPhone, you are so wonderful. You're my calendar. I can do all this wonderful stuff. And then in the corner of my eye, the new iPhone is being promoted. And it's got this, and it's got that, and it's got this. And suddenly I go, you're rubbish, pal. You're going. Why? A few minutes ago you loved me. Why? Because happy what else has just turned up. And this is a real trap. People do it with their phones, they do it with cars, they do it with houses. Listen, some people even do it with spouses. Seriously. Happy what? You get as much as you can out of them, then it's like happy what else? It's devastating. This is going to really come as a shock to you. Do you know some people actually do it with churches? I was devastated when I wrote that in the notes. What? Some people would just go to a church for a little while and get what they could get and then, I'm out of here. Why? Yeah, because happy what always leads to happy what else. Happiness is always associated with a who or to. I don't know if you can, some of you have to go back and remember a lot longer than me, but some must go back. A who or to. A who or to. When I was a kid, what didn't matter? What did not matter at all? If I could get Ronnie and Colin and myself and Mark together, man, we could do whatever. We would steal my dad's best playing cards and put them on the spokes of the bike and we'd ride around and tear them to shreds. We'd climb mulberry trees and get into places we shouldn't go and we'd be all covered in stuff and then deny that we'd ever been in the place. We could just, it didn't matter. We'd find like bits of sticks and suddenly they were guns and we were having wars. We found a little shovel in Ronnie's yard. It was a little small one. We dug a hole. It was 1.5 meters wide and 2 meters deep. And we were so happy. We were digging to China. And then his dad came home and saw the hole in the yard. Happy feelings gone. See, happiness is about who. It's not about what. If you have something or someone in your life and as things get older and your happiness disappears, you were never happy in the first place. you've just been marketed to. You've just been marketed to a happiness moment, because happy what always leads to happy what else? Now, there are some places where the mystery of happiness is evident. If you ever go into developing countries, and we've done work in Ghana, and we've done work in India and the Philippines, and you see how little they have, but then you see the look on their faces, and it's like they have such joy on their faces, such incredible joy. And you go, you need some of my happy what's so that you can be happy too. But they don't need the happy what's, because they know that happiness is found in the who. I love something Pastor Len said during the week to us. And it was about these little ones, and they've made microphone stands, and they've made guitars out of bottles with sticks, and they're having the best worship time. See, what is not it? The happiness is attached to who. Now, when we get sad when our relationships go bad, do you know that? We get sad when our relationships go bad. You know, parents are really any more happy than they are than their most unhappy child. Husbands are never happier than their wives. Did you know that employees are never happier than their employers as well? When relationships go bad and when things go south, things get really, really distressful for us. And here's the deal. In the end of your life, at the end of your life, you will have relational, not possessional regrets. You'll have relational regrets, not possessional. Nobody on their deathbed is going, could you please wheel me back out to the car park one last time, because I want to apologize to my car for the way I treated it. I was strapping it all the time. No one's doing that. Businessman's going, oh man, I wrote some lousy contracts. Could you just push me back to the office to write one last contract? I mean, your wife's not going to say to you, honey, could you just take me to the cupboard so I could see my shoes and try them on one last time? Oh, actually, that could happen. That's not a good example. No, when it comes to the end of our lives, we're not trying to make peace with the what's. We're trying to make peace with the who's. And when our relationships go bad, happiness is gone really, really fast. Relational disconnected people are never happy. And you can't be. You can't be, because if God created us, if He did, He's a triune God, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, which means that He lives in perpetual community. Perpetual community. So you and I cannot live well without being in community. It just doesn't work. Lone works really good for wolves, no good for humans. Jesus had a lot to say about this with relationships too, when he made a comment about taking your gift to the altar. Let me just read this for you. He said, therefore, he says, if you were offering your gift at the altar, they used to go to the temple under the old covenant, but it's like their form of church. If you come there and you remember your brother or your sister has something against you, watch this, leave your gift there in front of the altar, first go and be reconciled to them, then come and offer your gift. Do you know what God's essentially saying? He's just saying, don't come worship me. Don't even bother praying, because I am not listening. If you got an issue, you need to go sort that issue out first. And when you've sorted that relational issue out, then come worship me. But don't come worship me. If you hate your brother or you hate your sister, don't come worship me and say, oh, everything's good, it's lovely, it's that and the other, but then you don't do anything about your relationship. And that is the quickest way to become very unhappy. Now, some people will say, I don't need anyone to be happy. There's only two aspects of that people you come across. One is that they've got so many relationships that they don't know what it's like to actually feel isolated alone. Or the second one, which is usually the big one, is they can't fix the relationship. They can't fix it. So therefore, they do what we all do. When we can't fix something, we tell ourselves we don't need it. We don't need it. Who needs relationships anyway? They're overrated. Because that's what we do. That's how we handle it. So quick recap here. What makes you happy? Nothing. Marketers will market to you all day long. Happy moments that they know will not last. But they know you'll keep coming back because you're still trying to fill that void. Because happiness is not about a what, it's about a who. Second thing I've discovered is this. Happy people are at peace with themselves, with others, and with God. There are some people that they're just so cool in their own skin. They're not trying to prove anything. They're not worried about anything. They don't care about anything. They are just, they may have kids, they don't have kids, they're married, they're single. It doesn't matter. They just seem to be absolutely comfortable in their own skin. They don't even get upset when people offend them. It's water off a duck's back. They just let it go. They don't get angry, they don't get bitter, they don't get twisted. It is quite amazing. And when you see someone like this, it is really incredible to see. I read this story, and it's amazing because sometimes you think about what people have been through and you think, there's no way they shouldn't be bitter and twisted. This lady here's name's Charlotta, and I thought, this is crazy, man. This lady here, drive-by shooting, drug-induced with a young man, shoots and kills her 3-year-old there. She forgives him immediately. A few years later, he reaches out to make contact with her. She chooses to make contact. They build a relationship. She's now adopting him. He comes out of prison, so she's adopting the guy that murdered her 3-year-old. Wow. That's phenomenal. But she knows something. She understands what Jesus meant when he said, you need to forgive. You've got to learn to love your enemies. You've got to learn to love them. You've got to pray for those that use you. Bless those. Man, this is what keeps people happy. And I know what you're thinking, but this is what they are. Happy people have learned they have a sense of destiny and divine purpose. They believe that in the end, somehow justice will prevail if they leave it in God's hands. That's what Charlotta did. Somehow they have this thing within them, happy people. They realize that, you know what, nobody's getting away with anything. We all have to give an account for our life before God. So they have an ability to just let it go and to forgive, and they remain at peace. The enemy of happiness is relational regret. When you cannot let go, when you get bitter, when you get twisted, and happiness is gone because the who is all out of order. Now, if you're young, and you're young online, if you're in your 20s, or if you're young in the room here, you need to just listen to this really carefully. Your present will be your past eventually, which will show up to benefit you or bite you. Your present right now is going to be in your past really fast. And it's either going to be serving you for a better life or it's going to be hindering you. You're not going to have any regrets about the things you purchased, the what's. It's the relation things. Like, I can testify to this. Man, it feels to me like only yesterday I was 20. And now I'm in my 40s. You cruel people. Listen, peace with God paves the way for peace with ourselves and equips us to make peace with others. And peace is at the core of happiness. Do you know, a teacher of the law, one of the Jewish teachers of the law, came to Jesus one day, and he's not happy, so he's asking a question because he's not fulfilled within his faith. And he says, "Teacher, what is the greatest commandment of the law?" Now, we don't really associate happiness with law, but he's asking this because he's doing what he knows he should be doing, but it's not making him happy. So Jesus replied, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your strength, and with all your mind." So he's going, yeah, got that. I've been doing that for ages. And then Jesus says, and then the second is like it. Ooh, hang on. What's second? There's no second, buddy. We just have one. We just love God with all our heart, mind, soul, and strength, and we just Get rid of our enemies. That's it. Oh, no. Jesus is saying it's all changed now. It's changed now. Now you have to love God. And you have to love your neighbors. And you have to love your neighbor as yourself. Oh my goodness. This is blowing his mind compared to what he's used to. But Jesus is trying to show him where the secret of happiness is. He's saying it's peace with God that gives us peace with ourselves, that enables us to live at peace with our neighbors. You know, when I was young, and even to my shame, even as a pastor in my early days, I kind of felt God was in the way of my happiness. I thought he was in the way of my happiness. He was down on my freedom. But then I discovered God actually provides the way for my happiness. He provides the way for it. And to resist God is to resist happiness. So happiness is more about who than what. Remember, I'm just hitting across the top here on this one, and we're going to unpack this across this season. Happiness is people have peace with God, themselves, and with others. There's one other thing we have to talk about, and nobody likes to talk about. It's really one of those awkward kind of things, because everybody feels like today we all can just do our own thing and we can set our own values. But there is another thing that we're going to talk about that's tied to sin, and this is it: sin. Everybody loves that word. Nobody wants to talk about sin anymore. Everyone wants to go, I made a mistake. Oh, you're a mistaker. Okay. No. How many times did you make the mistake? 10. You're not a mistaker. You're a sinner. That's the difference. Sin. But we have to talk about it because it is essential to understand it for happiness. Now, I know that we now have people online, we've got from all over the place, and we've got atheists and skeptics and believers and doubters, and we're all in together now. So if you don't have a faith per se, then think about this that I'm going to talk about with sin in relation to if, say, you've got your own personal cognitive bias, your own personal set of values, someone violates that and you arc up and you want to go after them, okay, they just sinned against you. So think it from that point of view if you're actually not following Christ yet. So sin is actually an archery term. So it means to hit the bull. So if you hit the bullseye, that's full on. One away is one sin, further away is two sin, further away is three sin. So the further you are out of the center, the more sin. It's exactly the same with God. God has created a unique design for human beings. And if you are in the sweet spot of how He designed us to operate, everything is peaceful, everything is happy. If you're outside, then it's sin. And the further away you get away from it, the further and deeper into sin and the less happiness you'll have. So if you're a Jew, if you happen to be a Jew and you're online, you'll be looking at the first, with Exodus and Malachi, you'll be looking towards the Old Covenant to see what sin's about. If you're someone of other faith, then you will be looking directly at your teachings to see what sin's about. But we're talking about what Jesus has to say about sin. So that's what we're doing. But it's a very big topic, sin, and you could spend all day on it and everybody would still be confused. But to bust it down to what it really does, this is what sin does. Sin separates. That's what it does. That's at the heart of it. It separates. It separates you from God. It separates you from others, and it separates you from yourself. So when you lose a relationship, when something goes bad in one of your relationships, sin has got in there and eroded trust and brought about death into that relationship. Jesus himself said the wages of sin is death. So sin, the reward of sin, if you continue in it, continue to miss the mark, if you continue to miss it, is going to be death. That's just the way it is. And then you lose happiness. Sin separates by substitute. And this is how it does. It substitutes pleasure for fulfillment, substitutes things for people, substitutes images for intimacy, experience for exclusivity, the immediate for the ultimate, and self-expression over self-control. Sin makes a happy promise that sin can't keep, and sin is not your friend. It's not your friend. It kills relationships, it kills peace, it kills happiness, and when sin wins, you lose. That's the gig. When sin wins, you lose. James was the half-brother of Jesus, and he ended up coming up after Jesus' death, burial, and resurrection. He was a significant leader within the church. And he wrote this out of his document that he wrote out of the book of James. He said, "Then after desire has conceived, it gives birth to sin. And sin, when it is full grown, gives birth to death." So when you miss the mark and when you opt for sin, something less than God's best, you lose your happiness. And that will happen when you do the same thing in your relationships. When you miss the mark and you get outside it and further away, you will lose your happiness. And that stands in stark contrast to what we think. We think God trying to take away our happiness when that couldn't be further from the truth. So let me ask you a question. Has sin helped your relationships or hindered your relationships? I bet it's hindered. So let me try and bring this thing to a close for this morning. What makes us happy? No thing. Happiness is not about, it's about who, it's not about what. Since happy people are at peace with themselves, others, and God, since sin undermines peace and by separating and substituting, and since Jesus valued and prioritized peace with God and others and ourselves, and since you want to be happy, and since I want to be happy, I don't know, just maybe you might want to consider following Jesus. You might want to consider it. Maybe until we put the who of God ahead of the what's of this world, we will never truly be happy. Maybe it's only as we're at peace with God and peace within ourselves that we can be at peace with others. Maybe that's the gig. Imagine how different it would be if everybody in the world lived with that kind of relationship with God. No one's trying to prove anything. No one's trying to justify anything. Man, there'd be far less wars, far less racism, domestic violence, far less divorce if everybody lived from that place. So let me say it one last time. Happiness is about who, not what. Since happy people are at peace with themselves, others, and God. Since sin undermines peace by separating and substituting, and since Jesus himself valued and prioritized peace with God and substituting, and since you want to be happy and I want to be happy, maybe, just maybe, you might want to consider following Jesus. Because maybe we won't be happy until we put the who of God ahead of the what's of this world. Happy what always leads to happy what else. It's a void that cannot be filled. And it's only when Jesus lifts us back up out of the brokenness, bringing healing, bringing restoration, bringing peace for ourselves and others, that we start to find happiness. You can spend all the money you got in the whole world, keep going after happy moments, and you will never, ever achieve it. So maybe it's worth considering following Jesus. Just maybe when you put the who of God ahead of the what's of this world, you'll actually find peace and happiness. Now, if you're with us online and you're ready to start following Jesus, why don't you just talk to the host? Talk to the host and say, hey, how do I make my next step? And if you're in the room here, talk to someone that brought you about how do I go about starting following Jesus? But if you're not, that's okay. Stay around for the journey. Stay around for the journey because we're only just starting. We're only just starting to unpack this. Right relationships is what produces happiness. Let's pray together. Father, help us to realize that relationships are key to us being happy. We need the right who's in our life. And would you help us across this series to really take seriously? Maybe our relationship with you is what we need to be looking into. Maybe until we're at peace with you, we won't be able to be at peace with ourselves and grant it to others. Right now, as I'm praying, Lord, I'm just thinking there's probably some that are thinking about relationships that are strained, that aren't doing well right now. And I'm smart enough to realize that not every relationship can be restored, but maybe there's some, Lord, that we can restore. Maybe there's some that we can reach out and we can ask for forgiveness and we can initiate and begin to try and resolve some of those issues. So, Lord, I pray for anybody here that's in that position that you give them wisdom to know how to do that. And Lord, please help us to be gracious with each other as we're trying to work this out. You know, we don't lay down the law with each other. We lay down our lives for each other. We ask, what does love require of us? And Lord, if a lady called Charlotta can forgive and adopt a young man, a drug addict that murders her son, and live at peace in that whole situation, Lord, we can get to that place too. Help us to remember through this, no thing's going to help us make us happy, because happy is about who and not about what. And maybe help us to realize, or just to catch a revelation, that maybe that's the who of you that we're waiting for ahead of the what's of this world. Please help us, we pray, across this series. In Jesus' name, amen.